is in the books. Here we go. Thumbs up. It's all should be working. Let's talk about the results. UFC 302 took place at the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. Your main event, Islam Makhachev defeats Dustin Poirier via Darce choke at 2:42 of round 5. Let me kill this banner so we can get this going. There we are. Okay. Don't know if you guys heard the preamble before, but I'll make it very quick. The card itself overall was not very good. The main card itself was also not very good. The co-main event I do think is interesting, not because it was good, but there's some relevant developments, I think, from that fight that we should talk about. But obviously this fight, to me, was thrilling. This was an excellent fight. Dustin Poirier, 35 years of age. It was a tough matchup on paper, and he still found a way, I thought, to stymie a lot of the grappling of Islam Makhachev. I thought, not for the most part, not letting positions get too much worse, although obviously there were times where he was in peril. But in general, excellent hand fighting, good down blocking. Certainly in the center, he couldn't get taken down. And even against the cage, it looked like the training he had done with ATT teammate Mateusz Gamrot had really, really paid off. But in the end, it was a little bit too much. The final sequence went basically as follows. There was a guillotine attempt and a roll through, which he essentially came up on near mount with, Makhachev did. And Poirier kind of rolled through with it, tried to get to an elbow. And when he did, you could see still in top side. And I don't know if he had a leg Turk or not, but nevertheless, from that failed guillotine, and then he posted on the elbow. My daughter put that on me. Shouts to my daughter, Tuki. He put the elbow down, he kind of sits up into it, and then you saw him transition from that. I don't know if he had a 3/4 stack or not, but in either case, and it wasn't even fully on the bicep. He actually had it closer to the front of the arm, which can make it difficult, but he also had the bottom leg wrapped. He gets it, gets the tap. You can see Poirier admitted it later, but if you watch the slow motion, his head kind of bounces off of the floor. He goes out from it, so he was going to go out no matter what. Islam Makhachev gets the tap. This is such an interesting fight. I feel like if you looked at the pre-fight tape study I did, which was not super comprehensive, but it did pick up on certain things, and they really did play out in this fight. There were some questions, and folks had asked earlier in the week, how would this fight compare to the Khabib fight? If you look at the odds, they were a little bit closer, and if you looked at this one, they were a little bit wider. And I said on Thursday's live chat, I still thought Islam deserved to be the favorite and that he would win, but that those odds were a little bit far apart for my comfort. And I didn't know if the fight was going to play out exactly this way, but I do feel like that kind of held true here. Khabib has, and I know we're talking about him, but it is a relevant comparison. Khabib he doesn't have the well-roundedness of Islam. And we'll talk about some of the striking that Islam did, which I thought was really quite impressive overall. So he clearly has a more well-rounded game. And the fact that he didn't have access to the takedown in the way that he probably ordinarily would have expected it or otherwise needed it, and kept himself alive and basically was winning that fight for the most part with some of the striking, is also particularly impressive. But on the Poirier side, some of the tendencies you saw, good down blocking, I feel like that definitely showed up in this one. That was a big one. Second, he peels the hands. He peels the hooks with the hands in transition. A lot of times Poirier likes to go to turtle, and when he does, he'll grab a hook if it's open and he'll peel it. My wife left the window open, and there's insects in my room now. When you turn, he'll peel the hook. So what did you see Islam do? Again, there's many reasons why someone might do a body triangle, but nevertheless, they had to have seen that on paper. He peels the hook so often with his hands in transition. One hand on the strangle arm, one hand he peels off inside of his pocket, and he goes and he stands. So you saw the body triangle. So you could see guys kind of solving for each other a little bit as well. How about this from Dustin Poirier? He went for a switch twice on Khabib, and it failed. He went for a switch on Michael Chandler, and it failed, and it worked this time, and it worked. So there was like clear, the two big tendencies in the grappling department that Dustin has is jumping for guillotine, which I don't think he did in this fight. I don't recall him ever doing that. And that, although kind of, I had tweeted it, someone had pointed out that, it was the guillotine that led ultimately to the Darce. So this is sort of cruel irony for Poirier. But the point I'm trying to make is you could see them solving for each other the whole time, and he hits this switch on Islam as well. He didn't get to reverse position, but it created a scramble. Then they separated. Real improvement from Dustin Poirier at age 35. When he said to Joe Rogan after the fight, he feels like he can still be definitely competitive with the best of these guys. This fight was evidence of that. he absolutely could still be competitive. He just couldn't quite get over the hump. But I really feel like he made a very strong account of himself. But in the end, Islam simply is too much. And the difference is, you'll notice Habib got Poirier out in what, the third round, and never made it past the third. He's got a dogged, chase you down, on top of you style. He's always trying to put you on your hands, wrestle you to your hands, take away your base, get a hook in, either turn you to your back or turn you away. And just constantly advancing, constantly threatening, pounding on you. I mean, always making you, if you're not wrestling, you're blocking. If you're not blocking, you're hand fighting. And sometimes you're doing two or all three as best you can when that guy is going to work. So he pressures guys in a way that is a little bit more reckless, but it can lead to quicker finishes, relatively speaking, even against elite guys, which is why I think he got him out as quick as he did. Also, I think Poirier is simply better in terms of some of those particular dimensions than he once was. So this fight went a little bit longer. And then getting back to some of that question, like what's more dangerous for Poirier, a more well-rounded Islam or a less well-rounded but more dogged Habib? And the argument was a little bit harder to make because you just knew that like the longer it spent on the feet, the more risk you thought that Islam was taking. But the real, not surprise here per se, but the real proving grounds that this fight ended up showing us is, dude, Islam's striking is actually pretty good. It's pretty valuable. It's not the devastating boxing that you sometimes have seen over the course of Dustin Poirier's career. Pick whoever some of your more dynamic punchers are. He doesn't have that. But like, he has a fair amount. So what did you notice from him? He would slip the jab. They were both southpaws, so they didn't have open stance very much. So sometimes you could see Poirier shifting stance all the way through. But getting back to Islam, he was able to slip both the jab and the cross and counter. There was a couple of pull counters that you saw from Islam, and he didn't land devastatingly, but he would kind of touch, change angle, and then touch again, either when Poirier was turning or simply not expecting it in certain scenarios, and was largely able to stay safe. He hit him with a brilliant and hard uppercut after he already got him with a knee, and he was clinching him, getting him to raise, then go down. When he went down, he popped him. Like, I was actually very, very impressed. I mean, it truly is what saved him in this fight. If it had just been a grappling battle, I don't know exactly how that would have gone for him. But the fact that he was able to maintain on the feet this way, highly impressive. Highly impressive that he was good for that sort of thing. Here, hold on one second. There we are. The ability to slip and counter, man, I just cannot overstate how hard that is to do. That's very, very difficult. You have to be close enough to put yourself in a position where you can actually counter. Your timing has to be good. Your accuracy has to be good. Your kind of pocket presence, you have to be calm and comfortable to do that sort of thing. And again, you're missing just by the littlest amounts. I will say, though, like I was wondering if there was anything that Poirier could do. Again, I don't know how much it fit into the game plan or how much improv he had to go to potentially to address it. Did you see how heavy the U's were that Islam was making, right? So when you're rolling underneath a punch, you're essentially making a U. You'll start over the front foot, and then you come underneath, and you go to the back foot. Ideally, you'd be weighed, so you can keep your weight, you can keep your balance. Islam was going way under, and not only is that exhausting for him, but those huge motions create either an opportunity to intercept them or when they come up to crack them there. You never really saw Poirier jump on that too much. I'm guessing some of the threat of the takedown or just in general potential fatigue could have played a role in that. So he was vulnerable in certain areas. And I do wonder too, like the way in which he kind of fades a little bit. I don't know. He seems to me to, I didn't really know what to make of him wanting to go to 170, and I still don't really know about it. But I do think that this cut is probably at the end of what he can do at 155. Like, it probably is very, very difficult, I think, for Islam to get down there. And so, I wonder how much the cut drained him to this point. But nevertheless, just showing an incredibly well-rounded effort to get this done, a gutsy one from him. This was what I mean. This was a really good fight. I really enjoyed this quite a bit. I enjoyed, as I indicated, Poirier showing real life, real improvement. You can teach an old dog new tricks for Islam. I think showcasing to the world his well-rounded ability and what that's good for. And I think one thing else I want to say about Islam, like we talked, I want to be very careful. I'm not comparing the two things as identical. It's not what I'm doing. But I do want to give Islam a bit of a shout out here for one thing that I think goes unnoticed. And it was something that we saw with Usyk I'm not comparing him to Usyk directly, but just like listen to where these fights are taking place. Okay, now Usyk's a little bit different because he's been in some places that were even less hospitable overall. But if you look at these fights that Islam has had of late, he fought in Newark here. Dustin's not from Newark, but there was USA chance, and people did not want Islam to win in the crowd. So it's in hostile territory. He knocked out Volk in Abu Dhabi. Okay, fair enough. That's close to close to a home game. Excuse me. But then he fought Volk in Perth. Right, he's going down there in hostile territory. I know he had the one against Charles in Abu Dhabi. Again, that's pretty favorable territory. And he actually had the one against Dan Hooker as well, though he was kind of overmatched. He had the Davi Hamush one. He's had a couple of ones at St. Petersburg against Arman Tsarukyan, but that was a long, long time ago. But at least in the case of these like really, really tougher fights at the upper end of the division, Poirier, he's in hostile territory fighting for a title against Volkanovski, hostile territory fighting for a title or to defend his title. He had some other blessings. Again, I don't want to compare all things. Usyk's Road Warrior resume is infinitely better than this. I'm just sort of pointing out, like it's been a couple of times here where you could tell every time his opponent was doing something, it energized the crowd and what kind of role that can play with the judges, how it can derail you, how it can like enable your opponent. In the two of the last three fights he's had to go all over the ends of the earth in difficult situations, and then has emerged victorious both times. It is quite incredible. And I also want to say this about Islam as well. I said it before the fight. I think people misinterpreted it a little bit too. We said this on MK. So with this win, this puts him at 14 wins in a row. It's only 13 lightweight wins in a row, although that still would be number one, I believe. The fight against Bobby Green was a 160-pound catchweight fight, and so therefore it doesn't count as part of the lightweight resume, but the overall UFC resume, 14 wins in a row. And that puts him, I think, just behind Kamaru Usman now. It surpasses Max's streak for consecutive wins, and it surpasses Khabib. So the only, and it surpasses, and not only that, it surpasses John Jones, it surpasses GSP, Demetrius Johnson, not Anderson Silva, and not Kamaru. The point I'm trying to make is I'm not saying that Islam's resume is on par with those guys overall. That is not true. It is not true that he's got, the same career to this point as GSP or Demetrius Johnson. Not the argument. But when you look at that level of dominance, and then you look at his overall statistical resume, and how this fight, not so much withstanding, he doesn't get hit hardly at all. How successful he is with his own takedown defensive rate, his overall successful takedown percentage, and all these sort of other markers of statistical dominance in fights. And now you're beginning to see the names pop up on here that kind of match also that statistical performance. He's doing something incredibly special. I still don't think he's got that. Maybe it's the Oliveira one. It will depend on you. Maybe it's the second Volk, but the second Volk certainly has a question mark. I thought he won the first Volkanovski fight a lot more cleanly than most people. I think you could score it 4-1, but 3-2 I'd be fine with. I get that point, but there still he hasn't been able to get himself necessarily over the commercial hump with the fans or with the broader fan base or the buying public. And part of that is sort of, he just doesn't have Khabib's kind of in your face aura, or even really that same kind of style. But now that you're beginning to see some of these names being added, the Poiriers, who I do think deserves to be treated as one of the better lightweights ever. The two fights against Volk, against Charles, and then of course the resume before that's a little bit different. But at least now he's beginning to really add prestige names to the resume in ways that were simply not there before. And so between the statistical performances that we have seen overall, and now some of these prestige names, now he's beginning to put something together that's very, very good. It's not that I think his 14-fight win streak is the best 14-fight win streak that has ever been, but it speaks to a broader capability that he has that really needs to be more earnestly recognized. Fighting in hostile territory 2 of the last 3 times, and showing the kind of ability where it's like this. I mean, it's kind of funny, right? People are going to dock him because his grappling is not as dominant as Khabib. And again, Khabib got him out of there quicker. Fair enough. You can measure those two things heads up. But what Islam does have is the ability to have so many different escape hatches should he need them in a way. Like Khabib kind of had to just force a fight to be a certain way. Islam doesn't. It doesn't. He has a number of different ways in which a fight can be pursued against a number of different range of opponents. They all don't have to be the same way. And maybe that creates for a little bit more parity. Maybe that makes him a little bit harder to cheer for. Obviously, nationality plays a significant role, but, you know, capturing the fans' imagination. But the body of work is unbelievable. This is his UFC resume to date. All right. So that started, Jesus, a while ago. Obviously, he lost the Adriano Martins, but these are the wins since then. Here is the win streak. Chris Wade, Nick Lentz, Gleason Tebow, Cajun Johnson, Armin Saryuki, and Davi Hamosh, gold medalist at ADCC, Drew Dober, Thiago Moises, Dan Hooker, Bobby Green, and then the last ones, Charles Oliveira, 2 Volk fights, and then Poirier. And to me, there was nothing controversial about either of the Volk fights. Certainly the second one, I'm sure you would agree. It's impressive. If you can beat that kind of list, and you could do it while being statistically dominant in ways that are all-time great status in terms of that's the company you're keeping with that statistical performance. And then you can add prestige names, certainly at this stage of his career. Dude, this is a very, very special lightweight. I don't know where you'd exactly put him in the pantheon of all-time great lightweights, but he's in the conversation, certainly top 5 and probably top 3 as well. He doesn't have that second belt, which was not a lightweight achievement per se, but again, part of a broader, you know, when you're sort of assessing BJ Penn's greatness, there's what he did at 155, and then there's what he did at overall. And so you'd have to have a similar conversation with about Islam with that. But that's what he's doing. This is a guy who is doing things. I really, really hope that for all the love that was showered on Dustin Poirier, that we just don't forget Islam he is an excellent technical talent. And I want to say this too about, I didn't get to this a lot. He didn't get the takedown as often as he wanted. We'll pull up the numbers here in just a moment. But one of the things that you saw from Khabib, again, wrestling to his hands, that's a big one. Not just with Poirier, with everybody. But the other one was dude, Khabib is the king of this. Get you on a single leg, get you in motion, right? It's much easier to take someone down when they're hopping on one leg rather than if they're static. So you create a dynamic position and then you trip out the leg. We went over this in the grappling preview when we talked about this Dustin Poirier's fight with Khabib. You saw 2 instances of that were pretty key. One in the first round, and I think one in the third or the fourth round, where he's able to kick out the post leg, hike him up, and then kick out the post leg and get on top. These guys from Dagestan, these guys who can double, they can single, and then they can transition to all different kinds of basically adapted judo. I'm sure it's adapted sambo, but I'm just saying like the root origin. That's where sambo comes from. Sambo is a distilled version of judo for Russian combat, but okay, neither here nor there. Able to distill some of these judo attacks so they can attack with the legs and the hands at the same time. They can go upper body, lower body at the same time. The universe of takedowns that they have access to, and then the number of answers that they have for all of the various sort of stops that opponents put along the way, even for as good as Poirier looked here, even for as much improved as we saw him, that little edge that those guys have, you can see it can make huge differences in how rounds are scored and how rounds go and what opportunities are available to them and whatnot. Quite impressive. Quite impressive. So let's take a look at some of these numbers if we can here. I got them pulled up here. I usually want to wait a little bit because they update them over time. Let's see if they have, and I'll put them on the screen so you can see them here. Let's take a look. Let me put them up on the screen for you. All right, here we go. They look like this. Okay, let's look at it this way. All right, so here are today's numbers. Let's blow these up a little bit more even. There we go. All right, so overall, Islam 88 of 156 significant strikes, Poirier 74 out of 183, just a little bit higher overall. Pretty even in numbers. Look at the 56% in terms of significant strikes. That's high. That's really high. Look at Poirier, just around 40. That's not bad. It's a slight below average, but still, that's very, very good. 5 of 16 takedowns. Dude, Dustin Poirier stuffed 11 takedowns from Islam Makhachev. That's fucking good. Like, that's good. I realize that in the end, it didn't matter, but he kept it. This is a guy whose takedown percentage was nearly 70%. His offensive success rate was, I think, high 60s. And in this fight, it was 31. He took it and put it in half of what it normally is in terms of its average. He cut it in half. Very, very impressive. Certainly by Dustin Poirier. Let's take a look at some more of these numbers here, round by round. Not a whole lot going on. Islam won the first round, obviously. There's some, again, and I know that people who watch this normally know that I don't need to say this, but we'll say it one more time. These are quantitative totals, not qualitative. So we're not suggesting that because one number is higher, it automatically assumes that it's better, but it tends to be a helpful guideline to fights, except in close rounds. Okay. Pretty even in the second round, 26 and 24 with significant strikes, 18-15, 20-23. These guys were pretty close to each other, except in this last round. Islam got a little bit more. Got a takedown here. I'll say this for Islam, right? Takedowns. He gets one in the first round, and in the second, and in the third, and in the fourth, and in the fifth. It's just he got no riding. He didn't have much riding time in the fifth. He didn't need it. Decent riding time in the fourth. Decent riding time in the third. Obviously, the entire first round he had, and then he got a little bit in that second round. So that's pretty good by him. Let's take a look at targeting. Targeting is usually a big tell. Man, Islam going right to the head. There was a couple, dude. Islam had a couple of. I mean, the better body work between the two was from Poirier. Although that's with their hands, the better body work was probably with Poirier. Dude, there was a couple of times you could see Islam slip the jab over this shoulder. As he does, he's turning over. It goes this way, and then he would come back with a shot to the body, and that thing would thump against that midsection of Poirier. Like, so he had a couple of good, this is what I mean about Islam. Like, that kind of stuff really kept him in this fight in a very surprising way, I think. I thought for sure that if that fight was as standing as much as it was, that that would favor Poirier, and he would really be able to do something with it. There were a couple of big shots that Poirier landed, but can you ever really say that Islam was ever rocked or really in trouble? I know he had the bad cut, and that was from an elbow. That's great, but on skates, didn't knock him down. You know what I mean? Really had him. There was times, obviously, we haven't even talked about it, how Islam would go for, he would go for the tie plum or the clinch, excuse me, because he would go for the plum. So. And then he would use that to land shots to the body. He ultimately was able to get it to, change Poirier's posture, sometimes to level change. Sometimes he's able to transition to a knee. So he did some good work there as well. But let's take a look at some of the targeting if we can here. 92% to the head. So this is not how many he landed, but how much he targeted. Targeted at 92%. 71, again, just going to the body was more for Poirier. And in position, most of this was at distance. You can see this in the clinch. Again, some of that, these are numeric totals, right? So not qualitative measurements. But then here we go. Islam's in the red, Dustin's in the blue, and you can just see, just kind of, for the most part, round four, notwithstanding, kept a little bit of a lead on him. I just want to see any leg strikes. Yeah, you could see a little bit of that here in the fourth round by Dustin. I was wondering what was going to happen with that a little bit more. Now, with that in mind, let me see. Okay, so he landed Islam 88 of 156 significant strikes. Let's see what he did in the last 5-round fight he was in against Volkanovski. And that one, just 57 of 95. So you could see how much more on the fight on the feet this one was relative to past experiences. And I'm trying to see, Oliveira didn't go that long. And the last one was the Thiago Moises, but that was a huge ground battle. So this was the first time. This is the most significant strikes I think he's ever attempted or landed in a UFC fight, Islam. So this was a real proving grounds here. He went toe-to-toe with a very historically dynamic puncher in this division, and still it was able to basically outstrike him and landed the most amount of volume that he's ever landed on an opponent standing. Impressive to say the least. Super impressive. For Poirier, I'm trying to see if there's any of these numbers match up. He landed 74 over the course of almost 5 rounds. What was the last 5-round fight he was in? It's been a long time. Dan Hooker, yeah, he landed 153 in that one. Granted, that one went slightly longer because it went the full distance, but you can just see the difference. Twice as much as he landed in this one. Twice as much. So obviously Islam was able to do more on his offensive end to raise that number for himself, but at the same time kind of limit to a strong degree what Poirier can do. Let's talk a little bit about the career of Dustin Poirier if we can. That's very important. I say this often enough recently where I wonder if this statement is wearing out its welcome, or that maybe I don't know how people interpret it, but It really is true, and I think it's all because certain things are happening at a weird moment in time in the sport, but and I know many of you feel this way, but we should say it out loud. I said it for Max Holloway, who looked rejuvenated, obviously, at UFC 300 against Justin Gaethje. It has been an honor to cover Dustin Poirier's career. It's been a privilege. Like, even in bouts like this where he loses, he shows you something special about his character. He makes them interesting. Like, Dustin Poirier is not in shit fights. But more to the point, the thing that I really just admire about him is he's a blood and guts fighter, right? I mean, he's technical, black belt in jiu-jitsu, one of the best boxers in UFC lightweight history. He's technical, but he's got that blood and guts attitude. But just think about how long he's been in the fight game through multiple organizations, through WEC, through UFC, at 145, at 155, ups, downs, you name it. So many times he's been counted out. I mean, when he lost to Michael Johnson in the first round because he threw a naked uppercut and then Johnson came around with a hook and polished him off inside the first round. This was a fight that was UFC had in Hidalgo, Texas. You know, I wasn't sure like what that meant for him and like where he was going to go, and you know, fighting kind of like tooth and nail for a little while with Joe Duffy and whatnot. And in the end, he ended up accomplishing something that I don't know if we will see even from champions going forward, if they can at all avoid it. I mean, part of the way that you get to beating and stopping Justin Gaethje, beating and stopping Eddie Alvarez, beating and stopping Michael Chandler, beating and stopping Conor McGregor, the way you get to that is you kind of have to earn those fights, obviously, but you have to, you know, you're not getting any kind of he's never had an easy run. This fight, he obviously, with the one fight against BSD, was that enough to really deserve a title shot? By strict measurements, no, certainly it is not. And even those who are sympathetic to him and everything he's done, I think would understand that. It's a one fight win streak over a guy who was not, you know, a top 5 guy. So was it really deserved? No. So like in this case, he arrived at a position where finally he got, you know, a fight relatively easily. But you just look at his career, man. The dude has had setbacks and stayed grinding. The dude has had, you know, some good wins but stayed in the gym, stayed disciplined. He had some losses, didn't lose faith, didn't lose belief, and just got better and better and better. And before you know it, the dam just breaks. And he had this incredible renaissance in his career circa, I don't know, 2016, 2017, maybe a little bit earlier, somewhere around there, where he just began to set everything on fire. Quite incredible. And then you never hear a bad word about him in the gym. I know Colby tried to do that stupid ass thing where they were saying he was like bad to sparring partners. Get the fuck out of here with that. Please be serious. Nonsense. You don't hear people badmouth him. In fact, what you hear from his opponent, or excuse me, his opponents too, really, but what you hear from his teammates is how giving he is, how dedicated he is, how, for the most part, easy to get along with. Like, no one, I mean, trust me when I tell you that in this industry, people gossip, right? And any number of times I've had managers badmouth fighters, other fighters badmouth fighters, journalists badmouth fighters. I just can't think of any time anyone has come to me and like really badmouth Dustin Poirier. It just doesn't happen. You never see him on police blotters. You never had to see his mugshot. I mean, I realize he had a troubled upbringing, but once he really began to devote his life to his craft and then the people around him, it was the thing of the past. You never had to worry about him doing any kind of fucked up shit. You never, he managed his finances well. He was able to maximize that. And then today, with what could have been his last speech in the octagon, he does a truly remarkable thing all week, by the way, and even before this week, but certainly this week as well, talking about, you know, mental health and particularly men's mental health, where, you know, we're amidst a world where we're just told to just shut up and like shove your emotions down, and we'll just pretend that will make it all go away, and all of a sudden you can just out tough the agony that you feel inside, which is just complete fucking bullshit. It's a recipe for unhappiness, unless you can just get all the money in the world. But even then, I probably don't think it's happiness. It's a genuine insecurity. It's a genuine unhappiness. And he's talking about trying to solve it. And then in a super macho sport, with the last words he has to offer, he thanks the women in his life, his grandmother, his wife, and his daughter. They don't make him like Dustin Poirier very often. And they won't make him like him maybe ever again. He has total command of the audience. They love him. He has industry respect for not only what he's accomplished, but how he carries himself, and total security with who he is as a man, where he can show vulnerability and not feel the least bit worried about how it's going to be interpreted, and understand the people in his life that matter most, give them thanks, and understanding it's not necessarily all of the macho architecture that's around you all the time. It can be actually the things that are perceived to be the total opposite of that. And those are the things that have allowed him to be a savage. Those are the things that have allowed him to have all those performance of the night bonuses. Those are the things that have allowed him to be so great that you and I, admire him. I have so much respect for him as a fighter. I have so much respect for him as a dad. I don't know him personally in that way. I've interviewed him over the years, but I've never seen him up close, so I can only, no one lives a perfect life, and I'm sure he doesn't as well. But I really, really, really hope that everybody out there understands what they've got with Dustin Poirier. Special guy, very special guy. Okay. With that in mind, let's talk about that co-main event. What do we want to say about the co-main event? Okay. That co-main event sucked. That was not great. That was very predictable. Not so much every element of how the fight went, but people were booing this fight, and I'm like, how? I'm not saying that you had to love it. That's really not my point. But how do you not know that the fight is going to go this way? And of course, we know what the answer is. Well, you're probably just a casual fan, or people who like Sean Strickland, not so much for his fighting style. They may not be familiar with that, but more about obviously public positions he takes on political issues quite loudly. There are people who really like that. Okay, but like anybody who's been watching fights and watching any of his fights for any amount of time, like there's just no fucking possible way to be surprised that that's the way that it went. So not a great fight. Not a great fight. The problem that I have with the fight ultimately is that it never really got out of second gear offensively in either direction. First round, I would have given the first round of Paulo Costa probably. I know a lot of people wouldn't, but I thought that I know he was backing up, but the leg kicks I thought were the most impactful shots of that round. And the scorecard 49-46, I don't even understand how we can get that for Paulo Costa, although I can see 2 to maybe. I mean, people are saying 1, 2, and 5. I don't know about that, but whatever. I thought he had the most dynamic shots there. But after that, he was just kind of single shotting and then trying to, catch Strickland coming in, or to like find a head kick or find some kind of body kick. A lot of those got circle parried or down parried or caught, right? You just couldn't really do a whole lot with him. So he was able to get through on some of that. There were some moments a little bit later in the fight in addition, but there was no sustained offense from either guy in either direction, except for maybe a little bit at the end of that fifth when they kind of just had the rage out between them. There just wasn't, nobody was able to ever for any kind of amount of time really take command of the offense overall. And we have done a tape study on not so much Paulo Costa. I don't know if it really merits a tape study in his case, but Sean Strickland to me is a much more interesting case because he has that defense first style, as we all know. But what has been costing him in that DDP fight, and I would argue in the same fight with Jared Cannonier, he was too defensive, and you would see often these big retreats. We talked about it. He would cross step and get his head further back than his hips. If your head is further back than your hips, you can't possibly be in a position to counter effectively. It's not possible. You can counter a little bit, but you're not hitting them with anything. Nothing dynamic. You have to have your base under you. You have to have your feet planted under you. So it's a trade-off that he was making. Maximum retreat. I'm not going to get hit. Throw some traffic in between, right? It was that. But if you're doing that, you're losing on the not losing, but you're not adding any meaningful offense. You're just making a trade-off there, and then you're losing these decisions, and you're wondering how it's happened. In real time, I thought that DDP won the fight, and as you might remember, when I rescored it after watching it in close detail, I thought Sean Strickland won it. But the fact that it's so fucking close and it's so hard to tell is the problem here. So what did you see in this fight? There was one big change that I do think is worth pointing out in Sean Strickland's favor, namely, I don't think he did it enough. And you could see Eric Nixick, his coach and cornerman, kind of trying to prod him to go for it a little bit more. He definitely this time did not do any retreats on any of these blitzes. And I know you're saying, well, it's because he was walking down Paulo Costa, but there were times when Costa would throw back and there'd be a different reaction this time from Sean. This time, he either stood his ground, he may have backed up just a little bit, but most of the time he either stopped and or just walked through it and kept pursuing. Circle parry move, put a traffic, put a punch in the middle of traffic and punching lanes. When they come over the top, you're out of the way, and then you're right back on it. That was a big difference this time. A big difference this time. I heard DC saying in the first round, well, he's not cage cutting, and you saw him get to that cage cutting in the second round, but in the first round, there wasn't a lot of that. That seemed intentional too, kind of like making him backpedal, making him work. So to me, if you're a Sean Strickland fan, and assuming that, you care also about the way that he fights, you're not just a fan because he shares a similar worldview, there is something good to take from this, even though the fight was awful, which is that it does seem like the message that you've got to add more offense to your game while not abandoning your style. He's beginning to receive that message, and he might have some additional time to tinker with it and get a little bit better with it. I don't think he's ever going to be super offensively dynamic. He's just an inherently defensively, centered fighter. That's the way he just thinks about fighting. You can tell. But he clearly, they went to work on that. They went to work on that in Las Vegas. They went to work on that Extreme Couture, and I thought you saw some benefits of that. And again, also Paulo Costa enables that in a way that DDP would not. DDP has these big, heavy like blitzes where some measure of retreat is inevitable. But that gets us back to the Sean O'Malley conversation, where he cuts an angle to get out of the way and is right back in a center position, ready to throw, rather than these like huge, long retreats of cross-stepping to get out of the way. Better from Sean in that sense. In that particular sense, that was better from him. But Paulo Costa, dude, I don't know what the story is. That was just not a particularly impressive performance for me. But one of those checks, by the way, from Sean, which I was wondering where those were in the first round. He eventually got to them a little bit later because he was checking what Izzy was throwing at him, right? So I was like, why isn't he checking these? But then he got to him later. But there was one he got with the back leg, and it hit the bone. And, Paulo, I don't think he ever really found his footing again after that. But in general, dude, there's just, I don't know what to say about his game right now. I don't know where that is. It used to be he had to back you up against the fence, and he would kind of bull you back there and then really go ham. And that worked out pretty well against a certain caliber of opponent. And you can see he's trying to graduate to something else. But he never fights at angles. You ever notice that? Even Sean fights at angles. Sean might be walking forward a lot, but when they kind of pose off, especially if he's got you against the fence, what does he do? Jab, he gets off at this one. So then he creates a lane for the right hand, and then he fires it off. He did it against Izzy multiple times. He would go jab, right, roll under, and then throw the left right when he came back up. Even Sean, I know people like to clown Sean's striking on social media for the lack of ferocity it has relative to how outrageous he is as a person at times. But you got to give him, relative to Paulo Costa, of the two, who fights more at angles? Fucking Sean Strickland by a million miles. It's not even debatable. Remember what he said before the fight? He said, I'm better. He knows I'm better. I just have to fuck up to lose. Correct. That was totally correct. And so it just gets to the point where you're with Sean, with Paulo Costa, where you're like, someone had asked me on the live chat earlier this week, about the time off. And I was like, okay, well, at least he's back now. He had lost a bunch of time, but this was 2 times he was going to fight in a calendar year in a while. Okay, that's better. I'm not really seeing much progress, to be honest with you. Good fighters take advantage of openings. Great fighters make people make openings, and I don't see him doing much of either. It's not that he's not powerful or he doesn't train hard. I'm sure he does. Maybe he had an issue. I know there were some concerns that he had staph that looked like mat burn to me and not staph because you could see it over the other toes, which is a common scenario for mat burn, but whatever. He did have decent enough cardio to go 25. Like that's the other thing too. Like he's making improvements as well in terms of some of the bigger issues, like being tired, whatever. But in terms of thinking through problems and then having the skills and being able to access them as you problem solve, there's just, I don't know where, there's nothing there or not much there to make use of against quality opponents, especially defensively sound quality opponents. And I know what folks might say, Sean made him look that way. Yes. But even other people who kind of have to work with the trickiness of Sean's defense have kind of found a time or two to really show problem solving. I just didn't see a lot of problem solving going on. And folks might ask like where this puts him. Sean, I don't know if the UFC wants to give him a title shot because, you know, he has said that he doesn't think that, like, you know, that I don't think that they love him in the spotlight. You know, I've heard a little bit, heard some rumblings that they don't love that about him. I know folks might think because there's a political worldview alignment that they might, but I'm told that that's really not the case at all. So I don't know if he'll get that. And also but it certainly puts him in a better position than he, you know, I don't think they'll run it back with DDP, but let's see what happens after DDP fights Izzy and what that might mean. He might be in the sweepstakes for that, especially, or the other one is Whitaker and Hamzat in like a couple of weeks. He might get the winner of that, or maybe the winner of that gets a title shot and he gets the loser of Izzy and DDP. Who knows? So he's in that broader conversation. For Paulo Costa, man, I don't know really where he goes. I appreciate that he's trying to elevate his game. I appreciate that he is trying to not just be a marauder. I just don't know if it's working, is kind of the issue that I would have with it. And anyway, Sean Strickland wins. That 49-46 scorecard for Costa is hard to understand. And then a 50-45 for Strickland, 49-46. I had a 49-46 for Strickland. Kevin Holland defeats Mikhail Oleksiejczuk via armbar at 131 of round one. And fucking Oleksiejczuk, dude, Holland, okay. It's not to say that there's no way to get an armbar if someone is straight, if their hips are directly underneath yours and they're in guard. It's possible. You can do it. It's not the ideal position, but it can happen. But an ideal position would be angled off. That's an ideal position. If I can angle off, because that gives me access to your arm this way, which is what I want, right? He fucking just left his arm in there. It's like, I know some people think Kevin Holland's a goofball or, you know, doesn't fight up to his potential at times. And maybe some of those things are true, but he's also a Travis Lutter fucking black belt. Travis Lutter has good jiu-jitsu and I'm sure is a good teacher. Very, very respected grappler. He's a Travis Lutter black belt, and you gave him an ideal position in a UFC fight for an extended period. It's kind of in between triangle and armbar, where he postures up, kind of comes back down, and sits in his base. But he let Kevin Holland have the angle. Dude, what you have to move. You have to move. Otherwise, you're going to get fucking armbarred. And he doesn't move. So there he goes in the armbar. They roll down, they come underneath, and he just fucking either breaks it or dislocates it. I guess we'll see what the medical diagnosis ultimately is. I had noted Herb Dean was the referee in this one. Didn't quite see it right away. And then Kevin Holland, by the way, you could see him either right before he breaks it or like right after he breaks it. You can see him talking to Herb Dean about like I think either he told him I just broke it or I'm about to fucking break this, because the guy's not tapping and he's got him dead to rights. You have to clear the leg off the head. As long as you don't have, if you are stuck in an armbar, right, and their legs are over your head, you have to clear that. Like there's more to it than just that. But if you don't have that, you're not going to go anywhere. So you're just going to sit there and eat the shit, and which is exactly what happened. So he says to the fucking guy or the referee, like whatever, and then it just broke. Herb Dean has been the referee for Frank Mir versus Tim Sylvia, which if you haven't seen it, Frank Mir breaks Tim Sylvia's arm, not at the elbow. No. He breaks it at the forearm, right here in the middle of that thing. And you can see it. It doesn't pop through the skin, but you can see the skin, and something at the end of it just goes right in the middle. Like, it's bad. He broke it where he used his own cup as the fulcrum on the armbar. So the forearm, the cup was right here in the middle of it, and it just broke the thing right in half. He was the referee for that. He was the referee tonight, and he was the referee when Frank Mir Kimura'd Big Nog and just broke his shit completely when they rolled through and he came out on top. He has been like party to some of the most grisly fucking injuries. This one was not as bad as the other two, but still not great. So good win for Kevin Holland, dude. You fuck around with Kevin Holland, he will beat you. Like, he is talented, he is good, and that was just he got too comfortable. Oleg Shashik got too comfortable. Nico Price and Alex Moreno had a fight. It was unremarkable, 29-28 across the board. I know Moreno took it on short notice. It was not very interesting. Randy Brown had a fight with Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. He wins 29-28 on all three scorecards. That one was a little bit better, but not super awesome as well. Okay, a couple other details from the card. Jailton Almeida and Alexander Romanov. Dude, what was Romanov doing? Oh, my God. Almeida goes for a head inside single. He gets stopped. And so you can see Romanov pull him up to defend it. So what does Almeida do? He brings his head up to the inside chin space, body locks him, runs him backwards, outside trips, gets on top, eventually gets the back. And they're hand fighting. Dude, when you're hand fighting, if you're people like their instinct is, I'm going to grab the thing right around my chin. Right? That's what donks do at the bar. Oh, someone's choking me. I'm going to grab here, but you don't want to grab there. Because when you grab, you don't have, yes, if they don't know what they're doing, maybe you can grab there. It doesn't make a difference. But against a trained and talented MMA fighter, you don't want to grab here. It's not going to do much necessarily. You want to grab at the end of the lever. This is the lever. You got to grab here. You don't want to grab individual fingers, but you got to grab, or at a bare minimum, on top of the hand. The closer to the end of the lever, it's stronger for you and weaker for them, and it's much harder to get that. He doesn't reach his hand across and up to peel. Go look at his hand fighting. He just does this. He just like he was curling dumbbells to his chin. He never reaches up and across at the end of the fulcrum or the lever, to pull down. Like, what are we doing, fella? Like that, you're fighting in the UFC. Like you gotta know to do that stuff. And he just didn't. It was like just real lazy with the hand fighting, like hard to understand. So I don't know what the fuck that was. That was not great. He just looked disinterested. I don't know. People were like, "Oh, you're saying he threw it?" No, I'm not saying he threw it. I'm just saying I don't know what kind of commitment this dude has to competition anymore. Or at least right now. That was fucking weird. Grant Dawson gets a win over Joe Selesky. Jake Matthews had a pretty decent fight against Phil Rowe. Basil Hafez, by the way, defeating Mickey Gall via decision. That was a surprisingly competitive scrap, although in the end, Hafez just too powerful, I think. Eileen Perez takes on Jocelyn Elders. She wins 30-27 and then 29-28. And then Andre Lima at 130-pound catchweight defeats Mitch Raposo, who also got a scorecard for, I think, what was it? 29-28, another one that was kind of impossible to understand. Two other things that are worth mentioning about this card, if I may. One, the gloves. So this was the first time that they had the UFC gloves, the new ones that are supposed to be solving for eye pokes and abrasions. And didn't see a lot of evidence that it was doing much good in either case. Now, let me be very, very clear about what this means. We simply don't have enough data to know the truth about these gloves. We have no idea. We have to see what the broader data set shows us in UFC fights over time before we can really know. However, if there is a mechanism in the glove, it's supposed to keep your hands bent over more to prevent eye pokes. I have seen people say, there's nothing that gloves can do to prevent that. Like either close your hand or don't. And that's it. The gloves can't fix that. That seems very much not true. It seems to me that there probably are designs that could be accessed that would make it. You're not trying to eliminate eye pokes. You're trying to meaningfully reduce the number of them by design. And I don't think that this one. It's not clear to me. Like, what is the mechanism in the gloves that we believe meaningfully is going to change things? There's a little bit of pressure that makes it harder to open, but it doesn't look like it's nearly enough. So what is really there to fix? anything. I don't know what it is. Do you guys know who the company is that makes this? It's a company out of Taiwan called Dyaco, Dyaco. If you look at what they make like home and commercial gym and medical equipment. They do some other kinds of fitness equipment, but like the UFC is the only, that I can tell, the only brand that is like an active sports league or sports organization that they work with. They seem like one of those companies that's like a B2B business. Like they sell things to other businesses. They don't sell things. They do some commercial stuff, but not a ton. Most of it is B2B. I don't know what work did they put in to, like, who was designing this? What were they trying to solve for when they made these? And like, what were the assumptions made that would get them there? Because it just seems like there's nothing there to that story at all. I'm curious to see more. Again, we don't know. We have to see what the data shows. But there was nothing tonight. We had numerous eye pokes left and right that they seem to be solving for. Lastly, the judging, we've already talked a little bit about how weird it was. The refereeing, Gasper Oliver, not having a great night, where a guy gets, I think it was Lima, where he got either eye poked. Yeah, he got eye poked, and then they kind of separate. Like there was an eye poke, and then he's like, all right, come over here, you got to fight. And he never asked him if he was ready to continue. He never gave him time, and now you're supposed to do that with the unified rules. He didn't do that. Also, Lima, I think, was the one who was just fouling constantly. And it's like, dude, you don't, like, people think, oh, if he pokes in the eyes 2 or 3 times, you can take a point. First of all, you don't have to wait until there's multiple of them, but you don't even have to wait until there's multiple of the same ones to do that. Like if someone is grabbing the fence, eye poke, kicks the ball, like, take a point. If you're going to fight in an undisciplined way, take a fucking point. And once again, we just didn't have that here tonight. And so people just get away with fence grabbing. People get away with, there wasn't a ton of ball shots tonight. I think there was like a couple of smaller ones. And there was obviously plenty of eye pokes. But I don't understand why MMA officiating is so committed to the idea that less is more, when it quite clearly does not appear to be that way at all. So, yeah, I don't quite get it. Let's see what questions you guys have, and we'll go from there. By the way, if you get a member, I'll throw you up here too. So, Derek, welcome to the party. Friend, I think there's 2 of his. By the way, Mookie Alexander, thank you, my friend. That's so nice of you. Great guy. I know this guy. He worked at Bloody Elbow for a long time, so this is cool. All right, Jake, thank you so much. D. Lucian, welcome to the party. There is no sound. We fixed it. Audio donk. Yeah, we fixed it, guys. Yeah, okay, here we go. I'm going to put these up because they paid. Here we go. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. All right. Very good. Very good. Michael, thank you. There's more of these. I'm going to skip to the ones that we've got, but thank you very much, Alan W. Sorry about that to start the whole thing off. Okay. Paulie D says, if Dustin had pulled this off, maybe I would have believed this was a fair and just world. Luke, for such a smart guy, why do basic sound settings elude you? It's a great point. It's a great point. This thing had been on the whole day, and then it shut off, and I don't know why. So I had to turn it back on, but we got it worked out. Other than fighting Armin, Alan W says, is Islam done at lightweight? I think he might. Done is a strong word. It also kind of, I mean, the problem with him going to the welterweight is, assuming Leon hangs on, aren't you going to want to feed him to Shavkat? Or maybe they might do Shavkat JDM, but I don't think so. I don't think they're going to want to burn a contender before that one, at least one of those contenders gets a title shot. So it might not be a great time, but at the same time, I feel like 155 is hard for him to make, and there's not a clear-cut opponent for him that would make a ton of sense. Adrian says, Luke, I'm getting tired of the broadcast going over to Trump over and over. He was on the news all week. I want to watch fights, not being reminded of the politics, both sides included. You know what? It's kind of funny. I did a little bit of math. Do you know how many times Donald Trump has actually been to a UFC event? 34. 34 times. How what a random number. 34 times, huh? What is the scratch on your face? My barber fucking got me. This person writes, Dustin's unwillingness to give up the center was truly commendable. P.S. Can Francis beat Wilder? Dude, I don't have any interest in seeing Francis fight Wilder. Not to say they won't make it. I don't know, but I don't have any interest. Getting back to Dustin here, Dustin's unwillingness to give up the center was truly commendable. Yes. Extremely commendable. Very, very impressive the whole way. Key part of the strategy, their implementation on it was good. The down blocking was good. Again, my pre-fight breakdown didn't like kill it on YouTube, but I felt like we got to some of the bigger issues that you saw, and they were played out pretty consistently. Paulie D says, Cormier should not be commentating on Islam's fights. Islam's boxing is very good. The two division stuff is bollocks. Dude, the UFC just runs their own show. Like people being like, oh, there's conflict of interest. Who in the UFC front office cares about any of that? That Mountain writes, in round 3, Dustin pulled his shorts up 13 times. Is there something to explain this tick? Is it a big liability? Seems Islam shot at least once during a pull. I have seen boxing guys do it too. Boxers. I've seen boxers do it too. So I think it's just a habit. Guys have habits. Guys have ways in which they settle into fights, the ways that they like to feel with the gear. It's just a habit. In a perfect world, Islam fights Arman next. Okay, they might do that one. Rakhmonov fights winner of Leon Bilal. Okay. Then if both win, Rakhmonov versus Islam for 170 belt. I wouldn't hate that. That's a decent way you could go. I don't know if Islam wants that Arman fight, but yes, that's an interesting one. Am I crazy, or did Islam do a Russian tie snap but with Dustin's leg? So he did it where he'd take it and then you whip it in a U. I'd have to go back and look at the tape. It's a good question. Islam's a fucking beast. Bikash says, don't you think that the Golden Gloves are a bit rough? They created the cuts easily. I don't know how much they were doing on the cuts themselves. It's a little hard to say. But they didn't seem to do anything related to the eye pokes. Luke, a lot of fanfare about a potential Islam versus Leon matchup, but give your honest thoughts on Holloway versus Makhachev at 55. You can bury me if you'd like to. No offense will be taken. I don't think that's a burying you kind of thing. On the feet, I wouldn't want Makhachev to do a ton of work there, but I do wonder about the takedown. Now, Max has very good takedown defense, but I don't think it's going to be completely impenetrable. You know what? I don't hate that fight. I don't know if, again, it's like Islam looks like he's chasing an opponent that people thought he was going to beat Dustin, and he did. People were like, oh, he's bigger than Volkanovski. He should win, and he did. And they didn't necessarily think that about Charles. They kind of thought Charles was going to win. So that's one where he really, I think, subverted expectations. But they need someone that he wants, I think, someone that is not just big in stature, who's got the belt, obviously, at 170. But, people are also kind of craving a fight where he has to, more than he did tonight, like kind of figure it out. Not fight someone he has a good style matchup for on paper. Some of the judging tonight, man, people bet on this stuff. This is the fighter's livelihood, dude. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say anymore. Like, complaining on social media doesn't do anything. The commissions don't want to do anything. The only thing I can say is if you really want to change judging, you kind of have to literally go do it yourself by becoming one. Short of that, I don't know what can be done. Paulie D says, it's harder for a wrestler to be a star compared to a striker. Generally, not always. Khabib was a big star. Josh says, thanks to the UFC for virtue signaling and not sticking to sports. I stream for free and give my hard-earned money to Luke MK and the CME instead. Yeah, dude. No, it's not virtue signaling so much as it's sports washing. Just straight up sports washing. That's what that is. You can like that they did it, or you can not like that they did it, but that is what that is. I mean, it'd be one thing if he was like in attendance, but they showed him like 34 times. You know what I mean? That's an exceedingly high number, 34, and they just kept going back to it. Ilya might beat everyone at 45 and 55, Islam included. Islam is going to be too big, I think, for Ilya. Not Max, but Ilya. Anthony says, suggestion, if you are streaming, pay attention to live chat. Would def make a better experience. You ask questions, but you don't read the live chat. Muted stream could have been avoided had you pay any attention to the... Yes, that's probably true, but I can't do all of that and by myself. There's too many factors I'm kind of weighing here, but I do appreciate the note. I am aware that is a recommended solution. It's just not one that works. Douglas says, Luke, how do you think Max would fare against Islam? I think Max would make it competitive. I do. I really do. I think Max would make it competitive. I just think, again, Islam's got a lot of fucking tricks, man. A lot of tricks. Mac writes, if I were Arman, I'm licking my chops after this fight. Bet he thinks he can be more offensive with the grappling than Poirier and be solid defensively. Yeah, but it's one thing if you're avoiding the wrestling. It's another one if you're embracing it, and then what that means that you are and how that enables different parts of Islam's game that Poirier was shutting down. Licking chops, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure he believes he can win. I don't know that this fight is the. It's like, is Arman trying to keep it on the feet? He probably would want to defend it, but I think he probably also wants to take. Like, does he want to stand with Arman or with Islam? Maybe. I doubt it. Super Day Fairtex says, "You have any thoughts on some of the poor reffing and judging?" It's business as usual. Yes. Also, your favorite Trump moment from, I mean, my God, guys, can we knock it off with that? I mean, we saw him 34 times, right? Lazy Bed says, Dana using Trump like the UFC's felon Taylor Swift. You guys said it, not me. Don't get at me for it. All right, Dan says, I was at The Rock tonight, okay? Okay, card, great main event. Yeah, that's about right. Was there at least two hard-to-believe split decisions? Yes. I sat 25 behind the commentator desk. Oh, you were at the Prudential Center. Okay. I sat 25 feet behind the commentator desk. Yes, they were the weird two. The Raposo fight was one, and what was the other one? The Kopolov fight, I think, was the other one that had a weird-ass score. The Trump stuff was making tonight unbearable. I had many people texting me about this, by the way. I mean, it's not a sample size of anything, but he I mean, I said this before. I don't know if it's going to make UFC more or less popular. Hard to say. Time will tell. But it's definitely going to homogenize the audience. Like, that's a real thing that's going to happen. And it already has. Keegan says, Luke, do you think Sean's fight style makes it more difficult to give him a title shot? Yes. Obviously hard to beat, but there won't be a lot of people clamoring for it after tonight. No doubt he's skilled. No question about it. He's got a really interesting, different thing going on. Can't take it from him. But it's not going to be the kind of thing that's going to want to make the promoter go out of their way to give him something different, right? Poirier knocking out BSD, that'll do it. This gentleman says, those gold gloves looked as bad as Schaub's gold spray painted baseballs. I don't even know what those are. Anthony says, oh my God, every question's about, I didn't even bring him up, and you guys are bringing him up. Trump appearances on broadcast, over under 49 times. Again, the number was 34. 34 times. Can you believe that? 34 times for Trump. Can you get a dual triple monitor set up so you can have the live chat open? I have dual monitors open. Triple, I don't know. And then Rico says, do you think Islam looked more human? Yes, to an extent. Mm-hmm. It felt like where Islam is skill-wise and where the top of the division is closing. In certain respects, yes. But in other ways, again, the insurance with his striking is a little bit of an X factor. But we'll see. His takedown authority was not nearly what I thought it would be, but I do wonder how much of that is weight cut related, how drained he looked and how draining it ultimately is. I do wonder about that. All right, if you got any left, this is the time to get them in. Meep says, Volk versus Dustin for BMF in December. Volk versus Dustin for BMF in December. No thanks. I don't want to see Dustin. I don't want to see Volk against a puncher like that at 55. No, I'm good on that. Alex writes, is it me or did Dustin's punches and head movement seem substantially slower tonight? A little bit slower. A little bit. I mean, you know. Yeah, a little bit. Nothing terrible, but some. Michael says, Dana said at the post-fight for anyone to call Islam the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world when John Jones is still fighting is nuts. Even though one is active and actually fighting. Okay. I mean, John's done incredible shit, but he hasn't fought in a while, and other guys have, and they've. Yeah, I don't know. Pound for pound is entirely subjective, but on some level, recency, it's not bias as much as I'm saying what you have done recently has to play some kind of determinative role, does it not? And then Mac writes, meant to say when Islam can't get his dominant wrestling game going, he looks way more human, and that would excite Arman. Oh, I see. Potentially, though. I mean, still think Arman wants to do most of his best work on the ground. I don't know how much Arman's stand-up is going to really... I'd be curious to see how his stand-up matches up against Islam's. Again, he's got more of a hard-nosed style, but still for him, his comfort zone is just wrestling, and I think that is going to be... I don't know if Islam... Yeah, the first fight was Islam's favor, and I still think overall it would be a bit of a help to Islam. A bit of a help. All right, boys and girls. It wasn't a great night, but it was a great main event. Thank you guys so much for watching. One more time here, if I may. One more time. Thumbs up, hit subscribe. Sorry about this earlier. It was a bit of a mess, but we worked it out. We got it fixed. Morning Combat in studio on Monday. We're back. We'll react to this. We'll react to Conor's presser. All kinds of fun stuff. Love you all. Thank you so much for joining me. I greatly appreciate it. Sorry for the tech difficulties to start, but we did get it worked out. I love you. Get some sleep. Thank you for watching.